If I set an apple in front of you, did I set any half apples in front of you? Is a question that I would ask if I were interested in learning your ontological views on objects. And I am. So, if I set an apple in front of you, did I set any half apples in front of you? It seems like there can only be two possible answers, right? Either yes, I did set some half apples in front of you, or no, I didn't. Other notable possible answers include maybe, who cares, who are you, and go away. But I'm going to divide up the people who answered yes one more time. We'll call these groups the yes, you set an even crossing amount of countable tuples of lone yarps of 2 in front of me, and the yes, you set some number other than 2 half apples in front of me groups. If you don't know what a lone yarp is, don't worry, the definition is actually hard-coded into your genetic profile, so I'll just abbreviate the names and you can trust me that it won't matter. Alright, now we have these potential answers and can dive deeper into what the good things about each answer are. But really each of these answers sucks in different ways. If there are 0 half apples, then objects are constantly coming in and out of existence at weird places and times, or most of the objects we think exist don't actually exist. If there are exactly 2 half apples, then you have to further argue why there are only 2 and no more. And if there are some amount of not 2 half apples, then you need to explain why it is that number and make sure that it being that number isn't absurd in similar cases. If I point to a cat and say there are 5 half cats there, you would probably think I need to see a therapist. So everything thoroughly sucks, and the best answer to this question is just to have never been born in the first place. There goes the spirit of nihilism. Well, since every answer sucks, let's give more categories to each of these categories, and then see if we can at least argue that any of them suck slightly less than the others. If you said 0, you might be an ontological nihilist, which is not the nihilism that possessed me earlier, because philosophers are bad at coming up with interesting names for things. A lot of the time they like to keep words from other languages, which is fine, but that's not every day that you get a chance to create a new word in your own language and be taken somewhat seriously. Regardless, ontological nihilists, sometimes called ontological eliminativists, hold the view that no composite objects, or like half apples, exist, since they'd be made of molecules or atoms or quarks or energy waves, and as such they are composite things, not fundamental. Unfortunately, for some people, the original whole apple also has the same argument applied to it, so the eliminativists have to be okay with the vast majority of objects that we know and speak of and interact with not actually existing. Usually they'll leave what fundamental and non-composite objects look like as a question for physicists to answer, or maybe just indefinitely search for, who knows. If you said 0, but you still want apples to exist, or if you said 2, then you're probably conservative. Ontologically, at least. This is also called the restrictivist view. You probably want the objects that you think exist to exist, and the objects that you don't think exist not to exist. You monster. If you conservatively said 0, that's probably because you want to argue similar to the nihilist that the half apples don't exist. I can't eat a half apple right now, even if I wanted to, although I might be able to eat half of the whole apple. This isn't without its own issues, though. You have to contend with what happens when you actually cut the apple. Where along this process do half apples appear? If you conservatively said 2, you probably have something like mathematical idealism going on. We were all taught that numbers can be divided into 2 equal halves, so why not let that be our definition for what a half apple is, rather than leaving it vague and undefined? But then, why just 2? If this is a valid pair of half apples, then this, or this should be 2. And since no particular pair of these is determined by how the apple is right now, maybe those half apples don't actually exist, or maybe there are a lot of them. If you said an exact number that wasn't 0 or 2, please seek immediate professional help. If you said something like a lot, or quite a few, or maybe even infinite, then you're probably an ontological universalist. And if you're moderately consistent in this view, you could be an ontological permissivist. The permissive view is that everything is an object. Apple, yep, that's an object. Half apple, yep, that looks good. Half apple, yep, that checks out. Half apple, yep, beautiful. Your nose, my left toe, Bingus the alley cat, yep, that's an object and it has a name, thank you very much. I'm curious as to what everybody's initial response was to this question, and if you change your answer after considering the question longer. So leave a comment now or at the end of the video. If there's enough data, maybe I'll make a separate video analyzing the responses. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, does philosophy ever ask useful questions? Ever? And I understand that the way I'm creating this dilemma is not directly relevant to life-changing ideas, but I hope you can see that the arguments for or against every category here is what's relevant, and everything can be applied to many other things. When we're discussing sociological concepts like race, culture, or gender, we obviously need to have some agreement on what those words refer to. And those words can and often do refer to notably different categories of things, or potentially don't even refer to anything, depending on your ontological views. But this also goes far beyond sociological concepts. Value, morality, principles of economics, biological definitions such as sex and species definitions, morphologies, and even mathematical concepts all require some kind of ontology to even begin considering them in the first place. So, take some time to think about what you think about. If you're interested in learning more about ontological nihilism, conservatism, and permissivism, or just philosophy in general, be sure to subscribe. Or if you're from the future, there should be links to more of those videos here.